everybody, welcome to this episode of Path to Purchase. I'm Ollie Bilson and I'm with
Tom Breeze.
How are you doing today, Tom? How the devil are you?
I'm very good. How the devil are you? That's so British. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, very good. Loving it. Just been going over a lot of end of year stuff because is it late November now, coming into December. And December's, I try and make a slightly quieter month, like try and wrap up some projects we're working on and look into the new year and setting goals and stuff. So it's been a exciting time. I've been shutting myself away without a team for a couple of days already. So that's been nice. And looking forward to the next year.
Sweet. We've been doing exactly the same thing. We got some strategic planning coming up soon, which I love. So
you take it to the next level, though. You go kind of crazy on it.
Yeah.
We had a podcast on that, right?
We have done a podcast on that. Yeah. So anybody who wants to listen into Ollie's strategic planning process of how to scale things super fast, go and check it out. So what we're kind of talking about today is actually something which I had spoken to you briefly about with us being over in San Antonio in Texas recently. We were obviously both speaking at GKIC's Info Summit, and while we're over there, I actually took it for granted almost that sometimes we, living in kind of the agency world as both of us do, we see so many different things that we're either implementing for clients, things that are working, things that are not working. And often you gravitate towards having a very detailed conversation sometimes with people that you expect to be not necessarily on the same level as you, but getting down into the weeds really quick. And that kind of just brought me back to, we had a booth at the Info Summit there, and I didn't spend a lot of time on the booth. I'm definitely not the person that you want on the booth. But maybe this is the reason why. I have people coming up to me and talking to me about their business, their marketing, and what they're doing right now, and asking us, how we could help them. And what I found myself kind of talking to a lot of people about, frankly, even though this was quite an advanced conference for many people in the info space or thinking about getting into the info space, was like the basics. When it comes down to actually stuff that really works, I found myself really pulling back and trying to get people focused into what are the basics, what are the things that they should do before considering anything else. And I know one of the conversations we had with each other was your kind of, not necessarily framework or not even necessarily methodology, but just your overall approach to bringing people into the advertising world that you live in, and how you start thinking about putting these types of campaigns together. And what are the key things really that when you really pull back, what are the things that many people often miss but should never be missed in order to really start with advertising on any platform, Facebook, YouTube, AdWords, whatever it may be. So I thought we'd talk a bit about that really.
Yeah, of course. And I think you're completely right. I think that the internet marketing or digital marketing world has changed a lot over the last 3 years. Not necessarily a huge amount in terms of like actually what is happening, but more a case of like the information overload scenario for the small business owner. So like, I know that just a few years ago, the strategies and techniques that were available were just about you could just about, if you're a small business owner, implement it yourself, and you could use it and you could run with it, and it would make a lot of sense. But I know that if it comes to anything to do with a funnel these days, unless I keep it super simple, there's definitely a strategy in that for sure. There's a level where you can go to such a nth degree, which will make your funnel even better all the time. But there's no chance of a small business owner, I don't believe anyway anymore, of learning everything they could do and put it into place. So there is becoming this chasm of people are just getting started and need to learn everything very quickly to the point where it's like, well, do you know what? It might be just better off getting an agency to do this for me and work it that way. But then they might not be in the best place to actually get it implemented, because they might not have the products completely nailed down just yet. So hiring a good agency becomes more tough. And there is like definitely a discussion that we should probably have at some point, which is like it's become a lot more difficult, I believe, to get into kind of like running a business. Whilst there's much more opportunity, it just means there's a lot more that you could potentially do. And so getting that focus, getting that clarity is so important. And that's why I try and take it back to basics and not necessarily look at all the kind of the little things you could do, but more a case of like saying what's right for your business right now, and really form the strategy and the conversations you want to have. And then say, right, well, how do I do that? How do I have that conversation with those people at that particular time and really hit home so I turn them into a customer and can deliver what I do really effectively? But I think there's so much information out there that people get so kind of like bamboozled by it all that it's like they think they need to learn everything. Well, they really don't. And so hopefully this will clear some of that up in this session.
So what are the, you know, kind of the meaningful things that you know, we should be talking about? I mean, really at the beginning of the journey, from the awareness aspect of that you're trying to create with really any kind of advertising, really.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take this back to like pre-internet days. So I think that always clears things up quite easily, because it takes it back to basics, and also we all can understand it much more clearly. But also it's a case of like human beings haven't changed all that much. Like our neural pathways and stuff are pretty much still intact how they used to be. Although we do slightly have different behaviors when it comes to buying stuff online versus offline. But still our kind of like our brains still want to be satisfied in certain ways before making a purchase. And so what I often talk about is like, let's say, for example, you had a store 50 years ago. And this is how like business was done for thousands of years. Prior to that, you would have three types of customer. You would have one that's the window shopper, outside looking in, potentially could be interested in what you've got to offer. Those people are standing outside, peering in because they're slightly interested. You're then going to have some people that have come in the store and want to know more information about the products and services you potentially offer, want to test it out, know more about the features, the benefits, and those people are actively engaged in what you're in the conversation of potentially buying a product or a service. And then you get your third type of customer, which is the people that have made the decision to say, okay, yeah, cool, I've narrowed it down, here's the one I want, and are basically just about to purchase from you. And those people want a bit more certainty that they're going to be buying something that's going to be right for them, and want to kind of like just be comfortable with their decision for whatever reason. It's like whatever you imagine you're buying, like if you're thinking of buying something, you might have a slight interest in a certain type of brand because of some advertising they've done in the past or whatever they may have done in the past. Then you're like, okay, let's check out the different products that brand have got. Then you're like, right, great, that's the products I want. But you might want to, if it's a piece of clothing or an accessory, you might want to actually try it on. You might want to kind of just see it like there and then and be like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm happy now. That's exactly what I wanted, sort of thing. And then you go and buy. And of course, afterwards, you've got the making sure you negate all the buyer's remorse and make sure you kind of follow up. And we've talked about that previous episodes as well. But I mean, those three types of customers, the window shoppers, the in-store customers, and the people at the checkout, are the ones we need to really be talking to. And the communication we have with each one of those type of customer needs to be different, because you've got to grab the attention of the window shoppers, whereas you've got to like build that certainty with the people that check out. And the people that are in store who are looking for more information, guess what? You've got to give them more information and demonstrate the value of each product or service that you've got. But that's why I always like to take it back to the basics. And I always kind of go back to like pre-internet type advertisers, because I still think that they tapped in perfectly into the mindset of different people, knew what worked. They don't have the testing capability as we have today, and literally we can actually measure every single movement that someone makes. But they over not thousands, but like over hundreds of years, they would have been like testing and tracking and seeing what works in the advertising field across radio, TV, print advertising. And for me, it's like they really were the pioneers of the advertising world. And there's a book I've been reading again, probably for about the fifth time, which is Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. And it's just some of the principles we've been going through in terms of like how to kind of create content or how to write potent copy, for example. Things like that has just been really kind of like just, oh my God, it makes so much sense when you kind of get that down to basics. And I think that so often we have all these like different strategies and techniques and these different tools that we could potentially use, whereas really what you're doing at the end of the day is you're speaking to one other person. Sure, it might be behind a screen these days, but really you're speaking to one other person, you're communicating your message, and you want to try and hit home as best as possible. And so what I thought we could do is just go through a few bullet points that I've highlighted that I thought were really useful in terms of creating, well, I took it from a perspective of creating video scripts and just making sure we have some of these aspects in the scripts themselves. But I think it'd be just if people take a little nugget out of this for their own copy on their sales pages or their opt-in pages or their website or whatever, or just in kind of like into how they market their business, I think it could be really useful. So if that's cool with you, we'll go through some of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. No, it sounds really good. Sounds really good.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to kind of pick ones out. So I've made loads of notes here, so I'm just going to pick them out as we go. But one thing that I think is a really good idea is being very clear on who it's for or what it's for. So one of the examples they say is like, look, if your product is purely for mothers, make sure you've got that in your headline. That's the most important thing. Like, make sure you shout that out. Obviously, if it's more than just mothers, then don't just shout out mothers because you'll exclude those other people that could potentially buy your product. But if it's for a type of person, make sure you've got that really early on, like in the headline, this is who it's for. Because it will just grab attention straight away because it feels like, oh, wow, this is written for me, which is really important. Or if your product or service does something in particular, like the example they've got is like it cures bladder weakness, for example. Again, if you have an ad running in a newspaper in this scenario, but if you had an ad running to an audience that are looking for bladder weakness and you say that in the first few seconds of your video, saying, hey, look, this is a perfect cure for bladder weakness, let me tell you all about it. That's going to really grab the people that are actually interested in this stuff. And within seconds, you've got their attention. And that's kind of like a really, really important place to start. I thought it's so obvious, but so many people don't do it. A number of times I go to a web page where the headline's like a little bit ambiguous or very generic. Like if someone says like, here's how you can make this much money over the next like 72 hours. I'm like, oh my God, I've seen it all before. I've heard it all before. There's nothing different in that. Whereas like if it immediately speaks to who I am or what I'm looking for, it just kind of breaks through all of that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
That'd be a good starting place to mention. Obviously, mentioning promising a benefit of some sort. So again, this scenario I've got here is like how women over 35 can look younger. So again, you've called out women over 35, which is like those women who are looking at that, you immediately grab their attention, can look younger. And again, if you are potentially interested in looking younger and you're a woman over 35, that's the headline. Within like half a split second, you've read it and you're like, great, this is for me. And you want to read on. You've been lured into like, right, I want to now find out all the little tips and strategies you've got. So I thought that again, like just making sure that it's really crystal clear. And this is like not like really clever, persuasive copy. It's not like all of this. It's just like, hey, look, just keep it simple. And this is what you need to say. Don't have to be super creative about it all. It's simply just be very, very direct and like, here's what it does. And they also, which I thought was like a good thing that we don't put on like enough. When I look at some of the videos we created, we do it well, but I think we could definitely, as soon as I read this one, I thought, oh my God, we should do more of this. But it's just making sure you pull on like the fact that something is new, like a new method, a new strategy, a new improvement of some sort. Like the new is people are always looking for new ways, new methods, new strategies and things. And new as a word is like so powerful. And I know that we use it a lot, but probably we should be using it even more. Free is a great one, of course. That's kind of like a one that can be used quite a bit. I think it's overplayed quite a bit, especially in the internet marketing world, so to speak. But free is always an easy one because people are like, great, it's free. And that's an easy barrier to entry. If your product or service, you have a free offer, of course, that helps. But I think the new is like a really, really powerful word that probably isn't used quite so much. But any product that people bring to the market, it is inevitably new. It's a new method, new strategy. Otherwise, you wouldn't say, same old humdrum strategy, here you go, do you want it? It's like giving something new to go with is key there. So I thought that was good. One thing that they recommend, and we don't do this much really, I suppose it's because we work with a lot of personal brands, but they often mention to get the brand name in the headline. And I think that's if it's going to be done on print. I think if you're a persona in your business and like your face is recognizable and they see it straight away, and maybe you've got like a, it doesn't have to be said, but with like typography, like kinetic typography, your name comes up. Great, that's kind of like, maybe that's done. Or you can have the brand in the background of an image or a video. Something like further research that I've done on, not necessarily my research that I've carried out, but more like research into different advertising methods and things. One thing I've noticed was that a lot of brands that have their logo early on in a video ad means that it kind of like can ruin the engagement that people have with that video, just because as soon as people see a brand, they know it's an ad. And that's interesting, because I think that if it was on a paper and they saw the logo there or the brand has been mentioned, I think that's fine. I think that like people will read that and think, okay, cool, with credibility maybe straight away. Whereas I think if it's on a video, if the brand is there, I think people know it's an ad now and have like the defenses come up straight away. Whereas if it starts a story and then the brand is just like a scene on a carton or a t-shirt in the background, for example, later on in the video, you've built that engagement, you've built that emotional connection, and the brand is mentioned. I think that can be a more powerful way of doing it. And there's a lot of like research about brand uplift and all that sort of good stuff around that as well. So I think that might be different for print than it would be for video. And so we don't necessarily always recommend getting the actual brand name in straight away. We would say, look, once it's become appropriate to then bring in the brand, bring it in as soon as possible, because you obviously want to, because if people leave the video, you still got a positive impression. But again, if you're the persona of the business, then you've already got that going anyway. So if it's a personal brand, that's fine if you're appearing in the video. But sometimes people can feel like the brand too early makes it feel like an ad, and that can lose engagement sometimes as well. Cool. Are you liking this stuff so far? Is this useful?
Yeah, mate, it's awesome. It's awesome. Cool.
It's little snippets that I think people can use and find useful. So like one of the Ogilvy kind of like things about headlines, and I'll leave it with this one as well, is not to worry too much about the length of the headline. I think that one of his most successful ones that he wrote was like 18 words, and he said it was like at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in a new Rolls Royce comes from the electric clock. And that's kind of a very famous ad that Ogilvy and Mather brought out for Rolls Royce. And Rolls Royce don't do all that much advertising, of course. But that one in particular works incredibly well. And obviously it's pulling a lot of like different aspects on that headline. But again, it's quite a long headline. But I think that if you're mentioning the brand like they are, and they're using the word new, like the news Rolls Royce and stuff, and it's also kind of like easy and simple to understand the actual kind of the message behind the headline as well. I think that the longer you go, sometimes the better. I've never kind of been shied away from any long headlines or any long intros to a video ad either. It doesn't have to be short and sharp all the time. I think some of the content can be shortened and kind of be like short paragraphs or short sentences can be really impactful sometimes as well. Easy to understand and follow along. But a lot of the longer headlines, it kind of like mention a claim like to a certain extent, but at the end of that longer headline, it's going to definitely lure people on to read the rest of the content. And obviously that's an important step. So I hope there's a few like tidbits. I mean, I found it incredibly valuable, and I know that I create video all day long. So hopefully it's for everybody else.
Yeah. And I think kind of Ogilvy on advertising, Confessions, the Confessions book as well. If anybody's, not heard about those two books, I would highly endorse them going to check them out for sure. Because the people, always speaking to me about kind of what's working right now, what's absolutely quote unquote killing it for people.
Yeah.
And, the realities are the same tactics, strategies, messaging that we use today are time tested and proven that direct response marketers have been doing forever. And so if it's something to do with Eugene Schwartz, if it's Robert Collier, if it's maybe not so old as those guys like Joe Sugarman, all of these guys have kind of got it right, and we've been following suit with those thinkings, teachings for a long time and thoughts. So, often taking a step back and thinking where all of this kind of comes from is definitely worth your time in doing it. And so I always suggest as well, just kind of for people kind of especially living in the digital age, just reevaluating, recalibrating where they are and going back and just getting grounded again on the fundamentals, because as we live in a more complex technology-focused world of delivering marketing messages, different media, the basics still stay the same. And in fact, it's a bit like marketing automation. If you've kind of got a chaotic business, chaotic messaging, and you add automation to it, you've got automated chaos.
Yeah.
And so that is a problem, because you've got so much power now that if you haven't got that teamed up with the fundamentals, the basics, then you're never really able to dig in and actually get some of the results you could be getting, of course.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that going back to what we were speaking before about these three different types of audiences, like the window shoppers, the in-store customers, and the checkout customers. I think what we've spoken about so far, the actual headline of a piece or the first few seconds of a video, that really connects with those people that are the window shoppers, grabs their attention, makes sure they're like, oh wow, okay, I've got to listen to what this is. It called me out by who I am or what the product actually does. And immediately my ears are pricked up and I'm ready to listen in. And then there's a few tips here about creating the body of the content and what copy how to write for that copy here. I mean, I think it's going to be different for video than it will be for actual text on a page, for example, in a paper. But one of the first principles Ogilvy talks about is the way to write any copy. And I believe great copywriters are great for a number of different reasons, but I don't think anyone's that far off from being a really good copywriter, as long as I keep this principle in play, which is like what he recommends is pretend you're at a dinner party and you've sat next to someone and they're to your right, and they sit down and ask you the question of hey, look, I'm thinking of buying a new car, let's say, for example, which would you recommend? And that setting there, I think, is perfect. They've asked a question in a friendly environment, and you've got to answer the questions. And obviously, you've got to write it in a way that's going to be engaging, enthusiastic, but not kind of over the top, not kind of imagine you're still in the communication with somebody at a dinner party. So it can be colloquial. It can be you don't have to use these really long, big words or anything like that. It's very much keep it simple and just talk about the benefits of that particular product or service based on the questions they're asking. And I think if people keep that in mind, they can't go that far wrong with writing really powerful copy, especially when you know that you're writing in a colloquial way, you're writing in a way that you speak, and it's different to everybody else. And I think there's you can have such an affinity there with the actual customer, because you're the person that doesn't sell. You're the person that every day of the week, you're the person that actually knows your products inside out, your service inside out, and say, hey, look, here's actually what we do. And if you had to sit down next to somebody at a dinner party, I think it frames and sets the scene perfectly for writing really good copy. I don't know if you've thought of it like that before. I'm sure you have, but writing copy, I find is sometimes when I think, I've got to be really persuasive, I've got to really write this in a really intelligent way, I'll write the worst copy ever. But when I'm just actually, do you know what? This isn't right for everybody, and I've just got to talk plainly and speak really clearly to the people that it is right for. I find the conversion rates go through the roof, and people love the fact that there is that honesty with it. And I know that in some of this is not for these people is normally my favorite part, because I can quite easily disqualify the right people or the wrong people, if that makes sense. That also strengthens the people that are about to buy as well. So that works very well for us.
I think the thing is, as people are listening to this, and as we're talking about copy and talking about the fundamentals, is that some people are natural at doing something. Some people are natural salespeople. And so there's a very big difference between somebody that's a salesperson or a professional salesperson and somebody that tries to sell. I've had lots of salespeople that have worked for me, and there's always the distinction. You're either a salesperson or you're somebody that tries to sell. Now, the truth is, when it comes to copying, comes down to messaging, and comes down to some of the things that you're talking about there is copy. Some people can sit down and they can, without really any resources or raw material around them, sit down and write very compelling, persuasive piece to influence people to do what they want them to do. And again, with very little research into actually what they're writing about, they can immediately hone in. Most people, copy and messaging, I mean, it's fairly formulaic. It is a formula, like you were just talking about there. It's making sure that we are doing the basics. And, you know, for me, my analogy of bringing this back to basics is market, message, media. You know, and the results triangle, you know, Dan Kennedy has been, you know, through magnetic marketing taught about forever. And so, you know, establishing a market and then looking at the alignment of the message to that market and the right delivery platform, the right media to go out and get it. And still to this day, you know, this stuff isn't revolutionary. But to some people that are maybe a few steps beyond where this is, recalibrate yourself, bring yourself back to get some 3x5 cards on a table, index cards on a table, write out, you know, all of the benefits, write out all of the objections, the reasons why they won't buy, you know, and start really digging into the basics, really. So we should never forget.
Well, do you know what? I think, like, pulling on what you just mentioned there, if you can write down all the benefits, you can write down all the reasons why someone wouldn't buy. Sometimes people kind of like try and write copy to combat that and handle those objections up front. And I think that obviously you want to do that. You want to kind of like make sure you cover that, because that's a really important part of the actual sales process. And there's kind of like so much clever stuff that you can do around that, which is like, you can kind of obviously like mention a slight weakness and then just like frame it up with the most positive aspect of that as well. So like if you're a restaurant and you're a small restaurant, whilst you're small and you're cozy, you also, that's what brings the perfect environment to that restaurant. If you phrase it in a way that kind of like makes the small slight drawback a real big positive, then you can play it in that way and it makes a big difference there. And I think that often if you do have a big drawback, instead of spending time trying to figure out how to sell it still, sometimes better off to go back to the products and thinking, well, how do I change this? How do I actually make this not a problem any longer? That focus there can be really like much easier, because if you've got a great product or a great service, man, the advertising becomes easier. It just does. And that always becomes easier. But the one of the things that I think is like really interesting, and maybe even another conversation for another time as well, Oli, is that the fact that Ogilvy and Claude Hopkins and all these great advertisers from the past, all kind of like never won that many great awards as such. They never kind of like they won a fair share because they were so great, but they never wrote copy to win the awards, and never did it for that kind of like indulgent kind of like process. Because most of the ads they used to create didn't draw attention to themselves. They just did the job of selling the damn products really effectively. And I think that's a really interesting area to focus on, because that's what they used to focus on for print advertising. And I know that any time now where a brand brings out a really clever video, it can be shared a lot. And that wouldn't have happened in the past. So there's a really clever story, if there's a really clever creative behind a video, it tends to get that sharing aspect, gets a lot of brand awareness. And if it does a relatively good job of selling as well, it has that double impact. So you can be really creative, get everyone to share it and love it, for example, build that brand, and then also take the sales from that process as well. So I think maybe things have changed since the birth of like media and social media, and being able to kind of like share content a lot more freely. But it's still really interesting, because they were very much like in the mindset of like, write copy that converts, don't necessarily look to win awards, don't necessarily have to go and entertain anybody, but maybe with the birth, not necessarily even with TV, but more like the birth of online where people can share, people can comment, people can kind of turn that one piece of content into kind of like something else as well, like more of a discussion point. I wonder what the impact would be if you were to create like really heavy creative content that also sells really effectively, because I think if you could combine those two and get that kind of like that viral aspect of the ad itself, I imagine that you can do incredibly well, because we've created ads in the past that have been shared around because it's been a really good strategy or a really good technique. I know that some of the ads that I've created for YouTube stuff, we've had so many shares on Facebook and things. And it has kind of like, now we've stopped the advertising on a video, it keeps on getting shared around and stuff. That's always really interesting to see that content still being like distributed everywhere by other people. But I think that would be one of the things that has changed a lot more recently, and the fact that you can do clever stuff around remarketing. So whilst they were very much keen on like trying to display everything about that product and getting that sale straight away, for obvious reasons, the fact that they can't, for want of a better word, chase people around the internet with ads, nowadays it can be more a case of like you create the ad, build the relationship, not necessarily looking for that transaction up front, because you know that you're building that relationship to follow up with remarketing. So some interesting distinctions there from past till present. But I still think the principles at play of like not overcomplicating things, still thinking about speaking to someone one-to-one, giving the good advice, giving good sales copy, not thinking that has to be done by some genius or expert, and just being more honesty and integrity as part of this whole play. I think that it's just been really fascinating to look at what was working, what did work incredibly well, what continues to work incredibly well, go back to that basics, but also mixing it in with the potential that we have with today's technology is another really interesting conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. It's been great, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Nice one, Oli. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.